At Morix Tales, we are passionate about the art of storytelling. Our scripts are crafted to blend profound emotions with dramatic twists, aiming to bring justice to where it's most desperately needed. Prepare yourself for enthralling mysteries where the truth ultimately prevails, leaving an indelible mark on your heart and mind. After my husband's mistress became pregnant, his family offered me $8 million to grant him a divorce. They treated me with utter contempt, saying, "You're just a mistake we're willing to pay to erase." I didn't shed a tear, nor did I plead. I simply walked away without a backward glance. However, when I uncovered the truth 3 months later, everything shifted. Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me. Charlotte's journey commences with an unresolvable dilemma and a family secret that alters the course of her life. Before we delve deeper, I'm curious. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you held in high regard? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your perspective is valued here. Please be advised that while certain elements of this narrative have been fictionalized for artistic and educational purposes, the central theme of resilience and the establishment of boundaries reflects practical wisdom that can resonate deeply with many. There are experiences that cleave your life into distinct periods, before and after. These moments are so potent, so definitive, that they shatter your existing understanding of everything. For me, such a moment arrived on a rain-lashed Friday evening in late March 2024. I returned home earlier than anticipated, only to overhear my husband addressing another woman as sweetheart. My name is Charlotte. I am 30 years old and I have been married to Stanley for 7 years. 7 years that were meant to be the dawn of a beautiful union. Instead, they became a gradual disintegration of everything I once believed love to be. That Friday began like any other. I had spent the afternoon with Rebecca, my closest friend, who manages a contemporary art gallery downtown. We met for coffee, which evolved into an early dinner. Rebecca sensed that something was amiss, as she often did, but I deflected her concerns with practiced ease. I had become adept at feigning normalcy, even as the ground beneath me had been eroding for months. I should have recognized the warning signs sooner. The late nights Stanley attributed to client emergencies. The way his gaze had become distant, as if looking beyond me rather than at me. The manner in which he angled his phone away whenever I entered a room. But my focus was consumed by other struggles. The recurring disappointment of negative pregnancy tests each month. The 3 rounds of IVF that had depleted our savings and my hope in equal measure. The thinly veiled disappointment in the eyes of Stanley's parents. 7 years of trying, 7 years of doctor's appointments, hormone injections, and holding my breath every month, only to face yet another setback. 7 years of Dorothy, my mother-in-law, asking in that peculiar tone, "Any news yet, Charlotte?" As if children were commodities to be ordered at will, as if my body's recalcitrance was a personal affront to the Ashford family legacy. But on that Friday evening, none of that seemed to matter. As I pulled into our driveway 20 minutes earlier than planned, Rebecca having been summoned away by a gallery crisis, I entered a home that felt altered. The lighting was subdued. The rain lashed against the windows with a rhythm that should have been comforting but instead sounded foreboding. I slipped off my shoes in the foyer, calling out Stanley's name. No response. His car was in the driveway, his briefcase on the hall table. He was home, yet unresponsive. Then I heard them. Voices emanating from his study at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of warm light casting onto the hardwood floor. Compelled, I moved toward it, my footsteps muffled on the rug. A woman's voice. Unfamiliar perhaps, yet strained with an emotion I recognized all too well, the kind of desperation born from yearning for something uncertain. I paused just outside the door. Perhaps a part of me already knew. "Stanley, we need to tell her." The woman's voice broke. "I'm 3 months along. I can't keep this a secret. 3 months. The words struck me with the force of an ice-cold shock. My knees felt as though they had locked, my hand instinctively gripping the doorframe for support. Stanley's reply was low and measured. Not yet, Brittany. Give me some time. I need to handle this properly. Brittany. A flicker of recognition sparked. Stanley had mentioned a new assistant at the firm. Efficient, he'd said. Someone who truly grasped the demands of his work. Time? Brittany's voice escalated. How much more time do you require? I'm starting to show, Stanley. People are noticing. I know. His voice softened, adopting that familiar, soothing, placating tone he once used with me. I'll take care of it, I promise. Sweetheart. That small, ordinary word inflicted a deep wound. He used to call me that. Years ago, before the fertility treatments, before the monthly disappointments, before I became merely another item on his agenda. I stood in that hallway, the rain pounding against the glass, and felt my entire world lurch precariously. 3 months. While I had been scheduling consultations with yet another specialist, meticulously tracking my temperature each morning, and weeping in bathroom stalls over negative test results, he had been building a family with someone else. The rational part of my mind urged me to burst through the door, to confront them, to demand answers, explanations, apologies. But I didn't. Instead, I retreated slowly, cautiously, as if disengaging from a potentially dangerous encounter. My hands trembled. My heart pounded so fiercely I feared they could hear it through the door. Yet, I made no sound. I walked back down that hallway, our hallway, the one we had painted together 3 years prior, and stepped out of the front door. I entered my car and started the engine. The windshield wipers battled the rain as I reversed out of the driveway. I drove for 2 hours, with no destination, no plan. Simply driving through blurred streets, illuminated by the rain and my tears. I hadn't even realized I was crying. I passed the hospital where we underwent our IVF treatments, the park where Stanley had proposed on bended knee, the coffee shop where we spent lazy Sunday mornings immersed in comfortable silence over the newspaper. All of it now felt like a life belonging to someone else. Somewhere around the 30th mile, the tears ceased. The initial shock began to solidify into something else, something more resolute, more acute. Not quite anger, not yet. More like a cold, clear realization that nothing would ever be the same. I reflected on the past 7 years, how I had contorted myself to meet his family's expectations, how I had relinquished my interior design career to be a proper Ashford wife, how I had forced smiles through Dorothy's passive-aggressive remarks about my inability to produce an heir, how I had internalized the blame for our empty house, our unused nursery, our childless Christmas cards. And while I was relentlessly trying to mend something beyond my control, Stanley had been busy crafting the very family I believed we both desired, albeit without me. The rain began to subside as I found myself on an unfamiliar, quiet road. I steered the car to the shoulder, switched off the engine, and let the sudden silence envelop me. My phone had been intermittently buzzing, no doubt Stanley realizing my absence. I ignored it. Instead, I met my own gaze in the rearview mirror. My mascara had smudged, my eyes were red and puffy. I looked utterly broken, precisely as I was, a woman whose entire world had just imploded. Yet, as I sat there, watching raindrops streak down the windshield, a decision took root. I would not confront him tonight. I wouldn't resort to shouting, weeping, or begging for explanations, for the truth was already clear. More importantly, I knew what I needed to do. For 7 years, I had been Charlotte Ashford, the devoted wife, the disappointing daughter-in-law, the woman unable to conceive. But that version of me, the one who would have returned to that house and attempted to salvage the situation, to understand, to compete, she was gone. I restarted the engine and drove back through streets that no longer felt like home. As I pulled back into our driveway shortly before midnight, every light in the house blazed. Stanley's shadow moved across the living room window. I took a deep, steadying breath, quickly wiped my face, and opened the car door. I had no idea what the following day would hold, but tonight, one thing was crystal clear. The life I had been leading was over, and whatever came next, divorce, confrontation, a fresh start, I would face it as myself. Not as the woman Stanley desired, not as the daughter-in-law Dorothy expected, but simply as Charlotte, the woman I had nearly forgotten existed. 3 weeks elapsed before I uttered a word. 3 weeks of sharing the same bed, eating breakfast opposite each other, maintaining a pretense of normalcy. 3 weeks of silence, observation, and planning. That word, sweetheart, echoed repeatedly in my mind. He used to say it when he brought me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, when he'd pull me close and kiss my temple for no discernible reason. I couldn't recall when that had stopped. The affection had waned so gradually that I hadn't noticed its complete absence until it was long gone. But I wasn't compiling evidence for retribution, I was gathering it for self-preservation. Because somewhere within those 3 weeks, as I watched my husband become a stranger, I grasped a crucial understanding. This would not be an equitable contest. If I was to extricate myself from 7 years of my life, I would do so with calculated strategy. Stanley's predictable patterns became easier to discern once I began to pay attention. The late-night phone calls he took in the garage, dismissing them as work-related. The overnight business trips that had once been a quarterly occurrence, now happening weekly. The immediate shower upon returning home, even on days he claimed to have been in meetings all afternoon. I started documenting everything, not obsessively, not dramatically, but methodically. Dates, times, discrepancies in his accounts. I discreetly photographed his phone screen when he left it unattended, capturing brief glimpses. A contact labeled B, with rapid strings of texts that were deleted almost instantly. Receipts from restaurants we'd never frequented together, hotel charges he'd justified as client dinners that ran late. The paper trail grew, meticulously assembled piece by careful piece. On a Tuesday afternoon, I drafted an email from a new, untraceable account. I require a divorce attorney, discreetly. No affiliations with Ashford Legal Group. Can you assist? I had found Andrea Stone through a college acquaintance who had navigated her own tumultuous divorce. She's formidable, my friend had advised, and she doesn't back down from powerful families. At that moment, Andrea was precisely who I needed. Someone immune to intimidation by the Ashford name or their formidable legal team. Andrea's response arrived within the hour. Available for consultation Thursday, 2 p.m. Come alone, park 2 blocks away. She understood the gravity of the situation before I had even articulated it. The Ashford family dinner occurred every third Saturday. It was a tradition Dorothy had impressed upon me during our engagement with an air of authority that left no room for negotiation. For 7 years, I had graced that expansive dining room, embodying the role of the dutiful daughter-in-law, while Dorothy's increasingly pointed remarks about my failure to produce grandchildren chipped away at my resolve. This particular Saturday in mid-April, I came close to not attending. Stanley had been particularly distant all week, barely acknowledging my presence. But attending was crucial to the plan, maintaining the facade of normalcy, affording them no reason to suspect my knowledge. The Ashford estate sprawled across 15 acres in the Connecticut countryside, a testament to old wealth and deeply ingrained expectations. Walter, the estate manager, opened the imposing front doors as I approached. He was a kind man, always had been. Tonight, however, his eyes held an emotion I'd never witnessed: pity. He knew, somehow, he knew. Inside, Dorothy and Charles were already in the drawing room, cocktails in hand. Dorothy was impeccably attired, as always, her silver hair meticulously styled in an elegant chignon, pearls adorning her neck. They both turned as I entered, and the atmosphere in the room chilled perceptibly. Dorothy's greeting was measured, precisely cutting. "Charlotte, you look tired." Not, "How are you?" or "Good to see you." Merely an observation delivered like a clinical diagnosis. Stanley emerged from the hallway, and I witnessed a fleeting exchange between him and his mother, a look I couldn't quite decipher but instinctively understood. They had been discussing me, about how to manage the wife who was failing in her primary function. Dinner commenced, a six-course affair, accompanied by conversation that felt less like familial warmth and more like a strategic chess match. Charles discussed the firm's recent cases. Dorothy inquired about Stanley's workload with leading questions. Then, with the smoothness of polished glass, she shifted the focus. "Stanley tells us his new assistant has been invaluable. Brittany, I believe, quite capable apparently. Really understands the demands of the work." I maintained a neutral expression, taking a sip of my wine. Brittany. The name lingered between us like a wisp of smoke. Dorothy observed me over the rim of her glass, anticipating a reaction. I offered her none. Stanley shifted, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "She's very organized, helps keep the case files straight." Dorothy's smile was a thin, cold line. "How fortunate you found someone so compatible." The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Compatible. Not merely in a professional capacity. Dorothy knew. Of course she knew. She had likely known long before I did. The family always closed ranks, protecting their own. I had never truly been one of them. The conversation eventually meandered towards estate management, Dorothy's charity endeavors, and summer plans. I contributed when necessary, remained silent when I could. But I felt Dorothy's gaze returning to me periodically, dissecting, calculating. Then, as dessert was being cleared, she delivered her pronouncement. A hush fell over the table. Dorothy leaned back in her chair, her eyes fixed on me with unnerving precision. "Some women are meant to be mothers, Charlotte." Her voice was conversational, almost gentle. That, somehow, made it worse. "And some aren't. Perhaps it's time you accepted which category you fall into." The words struck me like a physical blow. Around the table, everyone froze. Stanley's fork clattered against his plate. Charles cleared his throat tentatively, but no one dared to contradict her. No one defended me. A wave of heat surged through my chest, an anger so potent and sharp it made my hands tremble. I yearned to hurl my wine glass at her face. I longed to reveal everything I knew about her precious son and his pregnant assistant. I craved to witness her carefully constructed composure shatter. Instead, I smiled. I met her gaze and smiled with every iota of the grace I had cultivated over 7 years as an Ashford wife. "Perhaps you're right, Dorothy." My voice emerged steady, almost pleasant. "Perhaps it is time I accepted many things." A flicker of surprise, perhaps? Or the nascent hint of uncertainty crossed her face. She had expected tears, defensiveness, anything but acquiescence. The remainder of dinner proceeded with carefully maintained polite conversation. When it concluded, I offered Dorothy and Charles the same formal courtesies I always had. Stanley walked me to my car and attempted to speak. "Charlotte, what my mother said." I raised a hand, silencing him. "It's fine." "It's not fine. She shouldn't have—" I looked at him directly for the first time in weeks. "It's fine." That night, seated at my desk while Stanley showered upstairs, I began a new document. Dates, times, observed behaviors, all that I had noticed over the past 3 weeks. I saved it to a cloud account he was unaware of, then meticulously cleared the browser history. That was the night I made my first truly decisive choice. If they intended to erase me, and Dorothy's remark had made it abundantly clear that was their plan, I would ensure my departure was accompanied by undeniable evidence, unwavering dignity, and sufficient leverage to preclude them from ever perceiving me as weak again. Because I was not weak. I had simply been engaged in the wrong conflict. But that battle was over. The new one was just commencing. An email arrived on a Monday morning in early May, 2 months after I had heard the word that irrevocably altered my trajectory. Subject: meeting required, urgent. Sender: Charles Ashford. No pleasantries, no pretense, just a date, a time, and an address etched in my memory. Ashford Legal Group, 15th floor, Conference Room B. Tuesday, 10 hours a.m. sharp. I reread it twice over my coffee. The contents hardly surprising. If anything, I had been anticipating this. The only question had been when, not if. Stanley descended the stairs as I was rereading the email, his appearance suggesting he hadn't slept. We had been occupying separate rooms for 2 weeks now. He had moved to the guest room to avoid disturbing me with his late nights. We both understood that was not the true reason. I placed my phone on the counter with enough force to draw his attention. His gaze fell upon the screen, still displaying the email. I watched his face contort through a spectrum of recognition, guilt, and resignation. Stanley opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. I raised a hand, halting him. Don't. Whatever you're about to say, just don't. He stood there, coffee mug suspended halfway to his lips, a complete stranger. How had I spent 7 years sharing a bed with him without truly seeing the man before me? Charlotte, the first. I received an email from your father. A meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. I assume you know the purpose. He gripped the edge of the counter. I tried to prevent this. I told them... You told them what, Stanley? That you needed more time? That you weren't ready? When were you going to be ready? When she's due? When the baby's born? Or were you simply going to continue living 2 lives until someone forced your hand? He flinched. Good. I wanted him to understand that I was no longer the woman who had driven around weeping 3 weeks prior. That woman had cried herself out. This woman had work to do. I left him standing in the kitchen and went upstairs to dress. I had calls to make. Rebecca answered on the first ring. Tell me. They're initiating their move. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Do you want me there? I paused, considering. Rebecca would rally. She would sit beside me, a steadfast presence through whatever was to come. But this was something I needed to face alone. No. But I need you on standby. If I don't contact you by noon, something has gone awry. Charlie, you know this is going to be brutal, right? They're not going to play fair? I know, which is why I have Andrea. My next call was to Andrea Stone. We had met in person once since our initial consultation, a discreet rendezvous at a coffee shop in a neighboring town. She had reviewed my evidence, posed probing questions about our finances, our non-existent prenuptial agreement, and the intricate power dynamics of the Ashford family. Then she had looked at me with sharp, intelligent eyes and stated, "They're going to try to bury you. Are you prepared to fight?" "The meeting is tomorrow," I said when she answered. 10 a.m. at their office. I'll be there by 9:30. Charlotte, remember our discussion. Do not engage with anything they say. Do not react. Allow me to handle the legal aspects. What if they direct questions to me? Defer to me, or simply state you need time to consider. This is their domain, their game. Do not allow them to pressure you into anything. The remainder of that day passed in a surreal daze. Stanley vanished to his downtown office, or so he claimed. I didn't inquire for details. I no longer cared to know. In the evening, I drove to our bank and accessed our safe deposit box. Inside, I placed copies of everything I had meticulously gathered: the documentation of Stanley's irregular hours, the photographs of his phone, the hotel receipts, the credit card statements. Andrea already possessed copies, but I desired an additional safeguard, a place beyond their reach. That evening, I laid out my attire for the following day with military precision. The black suit, impeccably tailored. A white blouse, conservative. Low heels, professional, not provocative. Pearl earrings, simple. No wedding ring. I had removed it 2 weeks prior, and Stanley had offered no comment. I reviewed my documents one last time, making notes in the margins, highlighting key dates. Andrea would have her own copies, but I needed to internalize this information flawlessly. Around midnight, I stood at my bedroom window, gazing out at our manicured lawn, at the flower beds I had planted 3 springs ago. 7 years. This house had been my home for 7 years. When did it cease to feel like one? When did it transform into merely a structure, a physical space devoid of warmth? I'd prepared a speech, carefully crafted, calm and rational. But standing there in the hushed darkness, I knew words weren't what I needed. Only one thing was clear. I would not be leaving as the woman they perceived me to be. I would not depart broken, desperate, or apologetic. I would leave on my own terms. Tomorrow, I would walk into that building with the understanding that I might leave with nothing, but I would walk out with my dignity intact. I would carry proof that I had not been blind or foolish, merely married to a man who chose the facile lie over the difficult truth. I finally retired to bed close to 1 a.m., but sleep eluded me. Somewhere down the hall, Stanley was likely awake too. We were both within these walls, both sleepless, both preparing for the impending day, yet we might as well have been continents apart. I found myself wondering when precisely we had become strangers, and, more significantly, when had I stopped caring? Because that was the truly peculiar aspect. Lying there in the darkness, contemplating the man I had married 7 years ago, I felt utterly detached. No affection, certainly, but not animosity either. Only a vast, empty neutrality. Perhaps that was the true conclusion of a marriage, not the dramatic confrontations or the copious tears. Just this, the quiet realization that the person you wedded has become someone you would not choose to know. Tomorrow would formalize what had already transpired. Tomorrow would translate an emotional truth I had been living with for weeks into the sterile language of law. I was ready. The conference room at Ashford Legal Group was colder than I had anticipated, or perhaps the chill emanated from within me. Andrea Stone was seated to my right, her briefcase open, pen poised. Across from us, Dorothy and Charles Ashford sat with an air of presiding over a board meeting, which, in essence, it was. A business transaction to erase me. The polished mahogany table between us gleamed, reflecting my own visage, calm, composed. That was essential. It was what I needed them to see. Dorothy was attired in a cream-colored suit that likely cost more than my car. Charles, beside her in charcoal gray, folded his hands on the table, reminiscent of a judge poised to deliver a verdict. To his left sat Nathan Pierce, their attorney, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and a wedding band so meticulously polished it caught the light with every subtle movement. Andrea leaned in slightly and whispered, "Remember, don't say anything unless I give the signal." I nodded once. Nathan Pierce opened a leather folder and slid a document across the table towards us. It was substantial, some 30 pages. He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Ashford," he began, and I nearly chuckled at the formal address. "We have prepared a comprehensive settlement agreement that we believe is both fair and generous given the circumstances." Fair, generous. I maintained a neutral expression. Andrea picked up the document and began to sift through it, her eyes scanning the pages, her expression unreadable. Nathan continued, "The terms are as follows. A lump sum payment of $8 million to be transferred within 10 business days of the signed agreement. In exchange, you will relinquish all present and future claims to the Ashford estate assets and any financial interest in Ashford Holdings or its subsidiaries. $8 million. The figure settled in my chest like a heavy stone. Andrea's pen scratched softly across her notepad. She did not look up. Additionally, Nathan stated, we are prepared to offer $500,000 in relocation assistance should you choose to leave Connecticut. This includes moving expenses, temporary housing, and legal fees associated with establishing residency elsewhere. Choose, as if it were a true option. Dorothy had remained silent thus far, perfectly still, her hands resting placidly on the table, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond my left shoulder. She appeared as a woman who had already secured victory and was merely awaiting my capitulation. Charles spoke next, his voice low and measured. We believe this offer reflects the years you have spent as part of this family, Charlotte. It is more than fair, and it allows everyone to move forward with dignity. Dignity. I nearly voiced the word aloud, nearly challenged him to define its meaning. Andrea set the document down. This agreement is heavily skewed, she stated, her tone sharp. My client is being asked to relinquish rights without any provisions for spousal support, property division, or consideration of marital contribution. Nathan offered a thin smile. Mrs. Ashford signed a prenuptial agreement 7 years ago. The terms of that agreement are enforceable. Enforceable does not equate to equitable, Andrea retorted. I met Nathan's gaze, then Charles's, then Dorothy's. What happens if I refuse? I asked. The room fell silent. Nathan folded his hands. Then we proceed to litigation, and I assure you, Mrs. Ashford, that process will be lengthy, expensive, and far less pleasant. Dorothy finally turned her gaze to me. Her eyes were like ice. There are incidents on record, Charlotte, she said, her voice soft. Behavioral concerns, emotional instability, documented interactions that could prove troubling in a courtroom setting. My stomach churned. Andrea's voice sliced through the air like a blade. Are you suggesting you have fabricated a narrative to discredit my client? Dorothy did not flinch. I'm suggesting that perception matters, and in a courtroom, perception becomes reality. I felt my hands clench in my lap. I forced them to relax. This was it. The moment they had meticulously orchestrated, the moment they intended to break me. Dorothy leaned forward. Her voice was calm, clinical, as if discussing quarterly earnings. Here's $8 million. Take the money and remove yourself from our lives. You are not family, you never were. You are simply a mistake we are willing to pay to erase. The words hung in the air. I remained motionless, my gaze steady, allowing none of them to perceive the way those words pierced through me. Andrea's hand lightly touched my arm, a silent cue. Do not react. I took a breath and exhaled slowly. Then I smiled. Not a wide smile, nor a forced one, but the subtle smile one gives when comprehension finally dawns. Thank you for the offer, I said quietly, but I am not signing anything today. Nathan frowned. Mrs. Ashford, this offer expires in 72 hours. If you don't, then my attorney will review it within 72 hours, I interjected, cutting him off. And we will respond accordingly. I stood. Andrea rose with me. Dorothy's expression remained unchanged, yet I detected it, for a fleeting second, a flicker of surprise in her icy eyes. Charles started to speak, but Dorothy raised a hand, silencing him. There is one matter within that contract you need to understand first. Charlotte, Dorothy said, her voice soft, almost kind. I paused. She did not elaborate. She simply looked at me, her smile thin and dangerous. We'll discuss it later, Dorothy stated, her voice cool. When you're ready to be reasonable. Andrea and I departed, Nathan Pierce trailing us to the elevator. He remained silent, hands tucked into his pockets, observing us as if we were suspects emerging from an interrogation. The elevator doors slid open. Andrea and I entered. As the doors closed, I caught a final glimpse of Nathan's face. He appeared almost regretful. The elevator descended in hushed quietude. Andrea finally broke the silence. "You handled yourself well in there." I offered no reply, still replaying Dorothy's words in my mind. "You're not family. You never were." The elevator doors opened on the ground floor, revealing the marble lobby. Andrea paused, turning to face me. "Charlotte, whatever's in that contract, whatever Dorothy was alluding to, we'll decipher it. But you cannot let them intimidate you into signing before we fully understand what we're up against." I nodded, a hollow affirmation. "I know." Yet, as the words left my lips, I felt the oppressive weight of Dorothy's pronouncement settling upon me. "There's one thing you need to understand first." What did they know? What had they discovered? Exiting the building into the crisp May air, I experienced, for the first time since that rainy Friday evening in March, a sensation akin to fear. Not because of their veiled threats, but due to what remained unsaid. 24 hours after Dorothy had labeled me a mistake, I sat in Andrea Stone's office, a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink before me, wrestling with a decision I could no longer postpone. Andrea spread the contract across her desk, arranging it like evidence at a crime scene. In a way, it was. Her office, while not cramped, was notably smaller than I had envisioned, exuding an aura of efficiency. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, laden with legal volumes that appeared well-thumbed, lined one wall. A window behind her desk offered a view of downtown Portland, the afternoon light casting sharp geometric patterns across the room. Andrea, with reading glasses perched on her nose, was meticulously marking the contract with a red pen, inscribing notes in the margins as if grading a student's substandard work. I watched her, a silent observer, waiting. Finally, she looked up. "This is a trap, Charlotte." The words, though anticipated, sent a shiver of unease through me. "Which aspect?" I inquired. "All of it." She turned to page 12 and tapped a section with her pen. "This relocation incentive clause. If you fail to leave Connecticut within 90 days, they can claim you've breached the agreement and demand the $8 million back, with interest." I stared at the paragraph, the words blurring into an incomprehensible mess. "So, they're exiling me," I stated. "Essentially, yes." Andrea flipped to another page. "And this non-disparagement clause. It's one-sided. They can say whatever they wish about you. You cannot defend yourself. If you do, they can sue you for breach and reclaim the money." A cold, simmering anger began to spread through my chest. "So, I take the money and disappear," I said, the words forming slowly. "And if anyone asks why I left, I can't tell the truth." "Correct." I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking responsively. "What are my options?" Andrea set her pen down. "Fight it in court. Discovery, depositions, trial. It will be expensive, public, and brutal. Or take the money, but rewrite the terms." I looked at her. "Can we do that?" "We can try." She leaned forward, her hands clasped on the desk. "What do you want, Charlotte?" I thought of Dorothy's expression across that boardroom table, the disdainful gaze that dismissed me as something to be discarded. "You're just a mistake we're willing to pay to erase." I took a breath. "I want the relocation clause removed," I stated. "Or at least modified. I'll move if I choose to, but I won't be driven out like a criminal." Andrea made a note. "Okay. What else?" "The non-disparagement clause must be reciprocal. If I cannot speak, neither can they." "Agreed." Another note was made. "Anything else?" I hesitated. "Then, if they violate the agreement, if they pursue me, If they attempt to manipulate the terms, I want a penalty clause. $2 million payable immediately. Andrea's eyebrows arched. That's bold. They want to treat this as a business transaction, I explained. Very well. But business transactions carry consequences when parties fail to uphold their end. Andrea offered a slight smile, a subtle curve of genuine respect for what she was hearing. And the $8 million? She inquired. Do you wish to negotiate for more? I considered it. I could demand 10, 12, even more. But that wasn't the essence of this struggle. No, I replied. I do not want their money. I want my freedom, and I want to walk away, knowing I did not compromise my self-respect to achieve it. Andrea nodded slowly. All right. Allow me to draft a counterproposal. She turned to her computer and began to type, the rhythmic clatter of the keys filling the room. I gazed out the window, watching the buildings and the shifting light as clouds drifted across the sky. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. How's it going? I typed back. I'm not backing down. 3 dots appeared. Then good. Let me know if you need anything. I set the phone down. Andrea continued typing. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, she turned the screen towards me. Read this, she said. Tell me if I've missed anything. I leaned forward and scanned the document. It was concise, professional. Every clause I had requested was present, articulated in clear, unambiguous language. It's perfect, I declared. Andrea hit print. The machine whirred to life. She retrieved the pages, clipped them together, and slid them into an envelope. I'll send this to Nathan Pierce tonight, she stated. He'll forward it to Dorothy and Charles. Then we wait. How long? Could be hours. Could be days. It depends on how eager they are for this to disappear quietly. I nodded. Andrea reclined in her chair and removed her glasses. Charlotte, may I ask you something? Of course. Why aren't you asking for more money? I looked at her, truly observed her. There was no judgment, only simple curiosity. Because I'm not signing away my self-respect, Andrea, I said quietly. I'm buying my freedom. But I'm buying it on my terms. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. That's the smartest thing I've heard all week. That night I returned home, sleep evading me. I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, replaying the last 48 hours. The boardroom, Dorothy's voice, the contract, Andrea's red pen. I contemplated what lay ahead. If they accepted my terms, I would have to leave. Pack everything. Bid farewell to the home I had spent 7 years transforming into my sanctuary. If they refused, I would have to fight, a process involving courtrooms, depositions, and the public airing of everything. I was unsure which outcome I desired more. At some point, exhaustion claimed me. When my phone rang the next morning, sunlight was already streaming through the window. I grabbed the device. Andrea's name illuminated the screen. Hello? They accepted, she announced. I sat bolt upright. What? Everything. Nathan called me 20 minutes ago. They're agreeing to all your terms. Relocation is optional. Non-disparagement is mutual. The penalty clause is included. We sign on Friday. I was speechless. Charlotte? Andrea's voice was laced with concern. Are you okay? Yeah, I managed, my voice sounding distant. Yeah, I'm okay. Nathan's tone was different, Andrea observed. Almost respectful. I think you surprised them. A faint, disbelieving laugh escaped me. Good. We'll finalize everything on Friday, 10 a.m. at my office. Bring your ID and anything you want to keep from the house. Sentimental items, documents, whatever. Once you sign, you won't want to go back there. Okay, I agreed. Charlotte? Yeah? You did the right thing. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Thanks, Andrea. I hung up. 4 days. I had 4 days to pack 7 years of my life into boxes. 4 days to say goodbye to the person I had been when I first walked into that house as Stanley Ashford's wife. 4 days before I became someone else. Someone free. I surveyed the bedroom, the bed we had shared, the dresser still bearing his cologne, the closet where my wedding dress hung in its plastic bag. I stood up. It was time to start packing. Packing 7 years into boxes should have taken longer than 3 days. But it didn't. It turned out that when you strip away everything belonging to someone else, his furniture, his art, his vision of who you were supposed to be, there wasn't much left. Just me. And that was enough. Rebecca arrived on Wednesday morning, armed with a stack of cardboard boxes and 2 cups of coffee. "Where do we start?" she asked, placing the cups on the kitchen counter. I glanced around the house, the leather couch Stanley had chosen, the abstract painting his mother had gifted us as a wedding present, the dining table where we had entertained guests I didn't particularly like. "With everything that's actually mine," I said. "It won't take long." She gave me a look, not of pity, but of understanding. "All right," she said. "Let's do this." We began in the bedroom. I took my clothes from the closet, dresses, jeans, sweaters, and folded them into boxes. Rebecca worked on the books, wrapping each one in newspaper before stacking them carefully. "You want these photo albums?" she asked, holding up the leather-bound album from our honeymoon. I glanced at it. The cover was embossed with our initials C and S. "Leave it," I said. "You sure? I don't need pictures to remember who I used to be." She set it aside and continued packing. I found a shoebox in the back of the closet. Inside were small mementos saved over the years: movie ticket stubs, a napkin from the restaurant where Stanley had proposed, a note he'd written during our first year of marriage that read, "Thinking of you. Can't wait to come home." I held the note for a moment, tracing his familiar handwriting. "I used to save these," I murmured. "Proof that we were real. Now they're just relics from someone else's life." I dropped the box into the trash. Rebecca said nothing, merely continued wrapping books. By evening, the bedroom was mostly cleared. My side of the closet was bare. The dresser drawers were open and empty. The room seemed larger without my belongings, as if I had never been there at all. I was taping up a box in the living room when I heard the front door open. Stanley. He stopped in the doorway, his gaze sweeping over the stacks of boxes lining the hallway. His tie was loosened, his jacket slung over one arm. He looked tired, older than I remembered. "Charlotte," he said quietly. "Please, can we talk?" I set the tape gun down. "There's nothing left to say, Stanley." "There's a lot to say." He stepped closer. "I know Stop." I stood to face him. "I don't want an apology. I don't want an explanation. I just want to leave." He ran a hand through his hair. "The baby, Brittany. She's due in July. I thought you should know." I felt nothing. "Congratulations," I said. His face crumpled. "Charlotte?" "I mean it," I said. "I hope it all works out for you." He stared at me as if I were a stranger. "Did you ever love me?" he asked. I contemplated it, truly considered it. "I did," I said finally, in the past tense. He opened his mouth, then closed it, turned, and walked down the hallway to the guest room. I heard the door click shut. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 empty boxes. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I replied. "I'm okay." Thursday passed in a blur. More boxes, more tape, more items I hadn't realized I'd accumulated over 7 years. By Friday morning, the house was nearly empty, with only furniture and a few remaining boxes for the movers. I took one final walk through: the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom. I paused at the nightstand on my side of the bed and opened the drawer. A few items remained: old jewelry I rarely wore, letters from my mother, a pair of reading glasses I'd forgotten about. I scooped them into a small bag, moving quickly. I had to be at Andrea's office by 10 to sign the papers. No time for lingering. As I pulled the drawer all the way out, ensuring I hadn't missed anything, something slipped and fell. An envelope. My new health insurance card from Portland. The paperwork I'd filed for Oregon residency. My new address. It slid down the back of the nightstand, wedging itself into the narrow gap between the drawer and the frame. I didn't see it. My attention was already directed toward the closet, checking the top shelf one last time. Satisfied, I grabbed the bag, closed the bedroom door, and returned to the kitchen. I placed my house keys on the counter, right next to the coffee maker Stanley used every morning. I stood at the threshold for a final moment. 7 years. This house had been my cage, beautiful, expensive, and suffocating. I didn't look back as I closed the door. If I had, perhaps I would have gone back for that envelope. The one with my new address, the one wedged behind the bedroom drawer, the one I had forgotten. But I didn't look back. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove to Andrea's office. 2 hours later, I signed the divorce papers in Andrea's office. The pen felt heavier than it should have, or perhaps it was just me. Andrea slid the final document across the desk. Initial here, sign here. I did. She countersigned, notarized, and filed everything into a manila folder. You've officially brought it, she said. And this morning, $8 million was transferred to your account. $8 million. I'm free. Free to leave. Free to start over. Free to disappear. Andrea leaned back. What's next for you, Charlotte? I thought about it. I don't know yet, I said. But I have 30 days to figure it out. She smiled. Good luck. I stood, shook her hand, and walked out. The sun was shining. The air smelled of rain and freshly cut grass. I got into my car and sat for a moment, staring at the steering wheel. For the next 30 days, I planned to vanish. No phone calls, no emails, no forwarding address. Just me. And for the first time in 7 years, that felt like enough. 3 weeks after signing away my marriage, I landed in Portland, Oregon, with 2 suitcases and a clean slate. The city smelled of rain, coffee, and pine. Everything Connecticut wasn't. Everything I needed. The studio apartment I'd rented sight unseen was on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in the Pearl District. Small, but bright. Large windows let in gray light even on the rainiest days. Hardwood floors creaked underfoot. A kitchenette with a 2-burner stove. A bathroom with a clawfoot tub that looked salvaged from somewhere old and beautiful. It was perfect. I stood in the middle of the empty space that first afternoon, listening to the rain tap against the glass, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness. Not yet. But peace. A quiet, still calm that settled into my bones like the first breath after holding your breath for too long. The first week, I didn't do much. I unpacked slowly, 1 box a day, sometimes less. I'd pull out a book I'd read years ago and loved, place it on the shelf, then sit on the floor and stare at it for an hour, just looking, memorizing the fact that it was mine, that this space was mine, that my life, for the first time in 7 years, was entirely, completely mine. I began a routine. Every morning I walked, rain or shine, mostly rain. I'd pull on my jacket, lace up my sneakers, and wander the streets for an hour, past brick buildings with ivy crawling up the sides, past food carts selling breakfast burritos, past bookstores with hand-painted signs, past people who didn't know me, didn't know my name, didn't know where I'd come from or what I'd left behind. It was freedom in its purest form. There was a coffee shop on the corner, small, cozy, with mismatched furniture and a chalkboard menu. I started going there every afternoon. Same time, same order. Black coffee, No sugar. The barista, a guy in his 20s with a nose ring, tattooed forearms, and a kind smile, recognized me by the third day. Usual? He asked, already reaching for a cup. I nodded. Please. He handed it to me, still warm, and I sat by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. I liked the repetition, the predictability. After months of chaos, there was something grounding about knowing exactly what would happen next. Rebecca called every day. Are you really okay? She asked on day 4, her voice careful. I looked out the window at the wet streets, the gray sky, the people hurrying past with umbrellas. I'm okay, I said. Better than I thought. You sound different. Different how? Lighter, maybe, she said. Like you're not carrying all that weight anymore. I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. Maybe I'm not. Good, she said softly. You deserve that. By the second week, I'd started to feel a little off. Nothing dramatic, just tired. More tired than usual. I'd go to bed at 9 and wake up at 8, still feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My limbs felt heavy. My head felt foggy. I chalked it up to stress, to everything my body had been through in the last 2 months. Then came the nausea. It started small, a queasy feeling in the mornings when I first woke up. I'd lie in bed for a few minutes, breathing slowly, waiting for it to pass. It always did eventually. I ignored it, drank water, ate plain toast, assumed it was my body adjusting to the change. But it didn't go away. One morning, I stood at the window watching the sunrise, pink and gold bleeding into the gray clouds, and burst into tears for no reason. I stood there crying, watching the sky change colors, and couldn't explain why. I told myself it was adjustment, that I was processing. But deep down, I wondered. My neighbor knocked on my door that afternoon. Hi, she said brightly when I opened it. I'm Grace Miller. I live next door. Just wanted to say welcome to the building. She was in her 50s with short gray hair, laugh lines around her eyes, and a warm smile. She held a plate of cookies wrapped in plastic. I bake when I'm bored, she said, handing me the plate. Hope you like chocolate chip? I took the plate, surprised. Thank you, that's really sweet. If you ever need anything, sugar, a screwdriver, someone to talk to, just knock, she said. I'm usually home. I will, I said. Thank you, Grace. She waved and disappeared back into her apartment. I closed the door and looked down at the cookies. Small kindnesses. I'd forgotten what they felt like. By the third week, the nausea was worse. I couldn't finish breakfast. The smell of coffee, the thing I'd loved most about Portland, suddenly made my stomach turn. I'd walk past my favorite cafe and have to hold my breath, pressing my hand over my mouth until I was safely past. One morning, I stood in the bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror. I looked pale, tired. My face was thinner than it had been a month ago. There were shadows under my eyes. Something's wrong, I thought. Or maybe right. I didn't know anymore, but my body was trying to tell me something. I leaned against the sink, gripping the edge, and thought back. When was the last time I'd had my period? I tried to remember. April. Late April, maybe. I counted backward. 6 weeks. 7. My heart started pounding. No, it couldn't be. 7 years of trying. 3 failed IVF rounds. Specialists gently, kindly telling me it would never happen naturally. But then I remembered the last night with Stanley. We'd been distant for months, barely speaking. But that night, I don't even remember why we reached for each other in the dark, as if trying to hold on to something that was already gone. I pressed my hand to my stomach. No, it couldn't be. But my body didn't lie. That afternoon, I walked to the pharmacy. I pulled my hood low, kept my head down as if buying something illegal. I grabbed 3 pregnancy tests from the shelf. 3, because I needed to be absolutely sure, and paid in cash. The cashier didn't even look at me. I walked home in the rain, clutching the plastic bag like it held something dangerous, something that could change everything. I told myself it was impossible. I told myself I was overreacting. But as I climbed the stairs to my apartment, my hand still pressed to my stomach, I knew. Somehow, I already knew. 3 test sticks lay on the bathroom counter like evidence of a crime I hadn't committed. 2 pink lines, 2 pink lines, 2 pink lines. Positive, positive, positive. Impossible. And yet, here I was, pregnant. I stared at them for a long time, 10 minutes, 20, waiting for the lines to fade, waiting for my eyes to adjust, waiting for reality to shift back into something that made sense. But they didn't fade, and reality didn't shift. 7 years of single lines and tears and failed treatments. 7 years of doctors kindly, gently telling me my body just wasn't built for this, that I should consider other options, that maybe it was time to let go. And now, when I was alone, divorced, 3,000 miles from everyone I'd ever known, now my body decided to work. I laughed, a short, sharp sound that echoed off the bathroom tiles. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh you make when the universe reveals itself to be utterly, absurdly unpredictable. I picked up my phone, my hands shaking. Rebecca answered on the second ring. "Charlie, breathe," she said before I could even speak. "Are you okay?" My voice cracked. "I'm pregnant." Silence. "Then are you sure?" 3 tests, I said. All positive, 2 lines, all of them. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, Charlie." "I don't know what to do," I said, my voice breaking. 7 years, Rebecca, 3 failed IVF cycles, thousands of dollars. Every month hoping, praying, and nothing. And now, when I'm finally free, when I'm finally building a new life without him. "This is a miracle," Rebecca said firmly. "Do you hear me? This is a miracle." I closed my eyes, pressing my palm against my stomach. "It doesn't feel like one. It feels terrifying." "Terrifying and miraculous aren't mutually exclusive," she said gently. "Charlie, you need to see a doctor. Get it confirmed. Do you want me to fly out there?" I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say yes, wanted someone to hold my hand through this, to tell me what to do, to make the decisions I felt too scared to make. But another part, the part that had packed up 7 years of my life in 3 days and moved across the country alone, knew I had to do this myself. "No," I said quietly, "I need to do this myself." "All right," she said, "but you call me the second you know anything. Promise me." "I promise." "Charlie." "Yeah?" "This is good news. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but it is." I looked down at the tests still sitting on the counter, their pink lines stark and undeniable. "I know," I said softly. I made an appointment at Riverside Medical Center for the next morning. The woman on the phone was cheerful and professional, asking routine questions about my last period, my symptoms, my medical history. I answered mechanically, my brain still struggling to catch up with reality. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my hand on my stomach, trying to wrap my mind around the impossible fact growing inside me. A baby. After 7 years of nothing, there was finally something real, something mine. But it didn't feel real yet. It felt like a dream I might wake up from at any moment. The clinic was small, clean, and quiet. The kind of place that smelled like antiseptic and lavender, with soft lighting and abstract paintings on the walls. I checked in at the front desk and sat in the waiting room, gripping my purse like it might float away if I let go. A nurse called my name. "Charlotte." I stood, my legs unsteady. "I'm Emma," she said, with a warm smile. "Dr. Palmer will see you now." I followed her down a narrow hallway into an exam room. Everything was pale blue and white, soft, clinical, safe. Emma took my blood pressure and temperature, making small talk about the weather, about Portland, about how I was adjusting to the city. I answered politely, but my mind was elsewhere. Dr. Palmer walked in a few minutes later. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a low bun. She shook my hand firmly. "Charlotte," she said, her voice warm and steady. "I understand you took a home pregnancy test." I nodded. 3, actually. All positive. She smiled. "Let's confirm with a blood test and an ultrasound then. We'll get you some answers." Emma drew my blood while Dr. Palmer asked questions. When was my last period? Had I been experiencing symptoms? Any cramping or bleeding? Nausea? I answered as best I could. My brain felt foggy, like I was moving through water. Then Dr. Palmer asked, "How long have you been trying to conceive?" I looked at her and something in my chest tightened. 7 years. 3 failed IVF rounds. I was told it probably wasn't going to happen. Her expression softened immediately. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was," I said quietly. "And now I don't understand." "Why now?" "Sometimes the body knows when the time is right," Dr. Palmer said gently. "Stress, anxiety, pressure, they can all interfere with conception. When you let go, when your body finally relaxes, things can fall into place. Let's see what we're working with." She gestured to the exam table. I lay down, pulled my shirt up, exposing my stomach. Emma dimmed the lights. Dr. Palmer squeezed gel onto my abdomen, cold, slippery, and pressed the ultrasound probe against my skin. I held my breath. The screen flickered. Gray and black shapes moved across it like shadows underwater. Dr. Palmer moved the probe slowly, carefully, her eyes fixed on the screen. I watched her face, searching for any sign of bad news, of complications, of the other shoe dropping. Then she paused. She moved the probe again, adjusted the angle, checked the screen. Frowned slightly, not in concern, but in concentration. "Well, Charlotte," she said. And there was something in her voice, something warm and careful. "I have good news. You're definitely pregnant. About 10 weeks along based on measurements." I exhaled, relief flooding through me. "And—" She paused, her eyes still on the screen. Then she smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up her entire face. "There are 2 heartbeats." The room went silent. I stared at her. "What?" She turned the screen toward me and pointed. 2 tiny flickering lights pulsing in rhythm, side by side. "Twins," she said gently. "You're carrying twins." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just stared at the screen, at those 2 tiny lights beating in perfect sync, and felt something break open inside me. Something I'd been holding closed for 7 years. Fear, grief, hope, longing, all of it, rushing out at once. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I even realized I was crying. 2 strong heartbeats, Dr. Palmer said softly. "Healthy. Thriving. Congratulations, Charlotte." I tried to speak. Couldn't. My throat was too tight, my chest too full. "That's—" I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. "That's impossible." "Rare," Dr. Palmer corrected gently, "but not impossible. Sometimes when conditions are right, the body surprises us." I looked at the screen again. 2 tiny shapes side by side, 2 hearts beating in unison, 2 lives, 2 miracles. Mine. "Can I—" My voice cracked. "Can I hear them?" Dr. Palmer nodded and turned on the sound. A soft, rapid thumping filled the room. Like the sound of horses galloping, fast and steady, and impossibly, beautifully alive. I closed my eyes and listened, and for the first time in years, maybe the first time since I'd left Connecticut, I felt whole. Emma helped me sit up afterward, her hand gentle on my shoulder. Dr. Palmer printed the ultrasound image and handed it to me. Two tiny shapes side by side, surrounded by darkness. "You'll need to come back in a few weeks for another scan," Dr. Palmer said. "But everything looks healthy. Strong. You're doing great." I nodded, still holding the printout like it might disappear if I let go. Dr. Palmer hesitated. Then gently, "Is there a father in the picture? Someone we should contact?" "Stanley. Yancey West." I looked at the picture, at those two tiny shapes, and I thought about Stanley, about Dorothy and Charles and Nathan Pierce, about the $8 million and the legal threats and the cruelty, about the life I'd left behind. "No," I said quietly but firmly. "He doesn't need to know. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Dr. Palmer nodded, no judgment in her eyes. "All right, it's your decision. Your body, your pregnancy, your choice." "Thank you," I whispered. I left the clinic with the ultrasound printout tucked into my purse and a folder of prenatal information under my arm. The sun was shining. The air smelled like rain and pine and possibility. I walked slowly back to my apartment, my hand resting on my stomach, feeling the secret tucked inside me. Two secrets, actually. Two heartbeats. Two lives that no one else knew about yet. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long. I'd almost forgotten what it was. Hope. 3 weeks after I learned about the twins, my phone rang at 6 o'clock in the morning. It was Rebecca. Her voice was shaking. "Charlotte," she said. They know. They know about the babies." My blood ran cold. "How?" I whispered. She told me. And slowly, piece by piece, I reconstructed the moment my secret stopped being mine. "Walter called me," Rebecca said. "He thought you should know." I sat up in bed, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach. "Know what?" "Stanley was cleaning out the bedroom," she said carefully. "To prepare for Brittany, he found an envelope." My heart dropped. "What envelope?" "Your new address," Rebecca said quietly. "Health insurance paperwork for Portland, Oregon." "Oh God, I forgot," I whispered. "I was packing so fast I must have—" "It fell behind the nightstand drawer," Rebecca said. "Walter said Stanley pulled the drawer all the way out and found it wedged in the back." I closed my eyes. I remembered that morning. The rush, the hurry, the desperate need to leave before I changed my mind. I'd grabbed jewelry, old letters, reading glasses. I thought I'd gotten everything, but I hadn't. "What did it say?" I asked. "Your new address in Portland," Rebecca said. "Pearl District, and your new health insurance information." I felt my stomach drop. "So, he knows where I am?" "Yes," Rebecca said. "And Charlotte, he hired someone, a private investigator." The words hit me like a punch. "What?" "Walter overheard the phone call," Rebecca said. "Stanley called Dorothy the second he found the envelope. And Dorothy, she didn't waste time." I pressed my hand to my mouth. "Charlotte, are you okay?" "No," I said. "I'm not okay." I closed my eyes and tried to picture it. Stanley, alone in our old bedroom. I still thought of it as ours, pulling out furniture, erasing my traces, making room for Brittany, for the baby that wasn't even his. And then the envelope. I imagined him picking it up, frowning, turning it over in his hands, then opening it, seeing my new address, Pearl District, Portland, Oregon, the health insurance card with my name, Oregon residency paperwork. I pictured him sitting there, staring at the proof that I'd built a new life without him, 3,000 miles away. And then I knew what he'd do next. He'd call his mother, and Dorothy would hire someone to find out what I was hiding. Walter said there was more, Rebecca continued, her voice careful. Dorothy hired a private investigator, someone discreet. They've been watching you for 2 weeks. My blood turned to ice. Watching me? Following you, taking photos. They know you've been going to Riverside Medical Center, multiple appointments. I felt sick. They've been following me? The investigator reported back 3 days ago. Rebecca said quietly. Charlotte, they know it's an OBGYN clinic. They know you're pregnant. I pressed my hand to my stomach, feeling violated, exposed. Someone had been watching me, following me through the streets of Portland, taking pictures of me walking into that clinic, recording my appointments, my private sacred moments. And the twins? I whispered. Rebecca's voice was barely audible. Walter said the investigator got access to some records. Medical privacy laws don't mean much when you have enough money. They know, Charlotte. They know it's twins. I couldn't breathe. Walter overheard part of the meeting, Rebecca said. Dorothy and Charles came to the estate immediately after they got the report. Of course they did. What did they say? Rebecca hesitated. Charlotte, I don't think you want to. Tell me. She sighed. Walter heard Dorothy through the study door. She said, Those children carry Ashford blood. We can't let them go. We'll bring her back. Whatever it takes. My hands clenched into fists. They can't, I said. My voice was tight. I signed papers. I took the money. I left. Charlotte, Rebecca said gently. They have lawyers, resources. Dorothy said, and I'm quoting Walter here. She's alone in Oregon with no support. We'll make an offer she can't refuse. Rage rose in my chest, hot and sharp and suffocating. I'm not alone, I said. I know, Rebecca said softly, but they don't see it that way. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was just starting to rise over Portland, pink and gold light spilling over the buildings. I thought I was free. I thought I'd escaped. But they'd found me. Even from 3,000 miles away, they'd found me. What else did Walter say? I asked. Rebecca hesitated again. He said Charles told Stanley to hire a lawyer, that they'd file for custody the second the babies were born, that you'd signed away your rights to the Ashford estate, but the children hadn't, that they were entitled to the family's protection. Protection? I repeated bitterly. They want to control them, own them. I know, Rebecca said. They spent 7 years blaming me for not giving them an heir, and now that I finally have what they wanted, they're going to try to take it from me. Charlotte, they're not going to let me go, I said, my voice cracking. Not now. Not when I'm carrying the heirs they spent 7 years demanding from me. Rebecca didn't answer because she knew I was right. I stood there for a long time after we hung up, staring out the window, my hand on my stomach, feeling the 2 tiny lives growing inside me. Mine, not theirs. Mine. I thought about Dorothy's voice through the study door. We'll bring her back, whatever it takes. I thought about the private investigator following me, watching me, photographing me without my knowledge. I thought about the choice I'd made 3 weeks ago to keep the pregnancy secret, to protect these babies from the family that had tried to erase me, and I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice, because if they'd known from the beginning, they would have controlled everything, my pregnancy, my body, my children. But now I had time, a head start, 3 months to prepare, to plan, to build a life for these babies that didn't include the Ashfords. I picked up my phone. Andrea Stone answered on the second ring. Charlotte, she said. It's early. Is everything okay? They found out, I said, my voice steady now, calm. About the pregnancy, the twins. There was a long pause. Then Andrea's voice, calm but serious. Charlotte, we need to prepare. If they're coming for those babies, they won't play nice and it won't be quiet. I know, I said. Can you come to my office this afternoon? Yes. Good. We'll start building your case. But Charlotte? Yeah. This is going to get ugly. Are you ready for that? I looked out the window at the sunrise, at the city I'd chosen, at the life I was building. Yes, I said. I'm ready. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 days after I learned they'd found out. I was making lunch, badly, because I had no appetite, when the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I wish I hadn't. Nathan Pierce's voice was exactly as I remembered it, cold, professional, and threatening. I was standing at the kitchen counter staring at a half-made sandwich I had no intention of eating. The smell of turkey made my stomach turn. Everything made my stomach turn these days. 16 weeks. 4 months. The twins were growing, and so was the nausea. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I stared at it for a long moment. Let it ring, then ring again. Finally, I picked up. Hello, Mrs. Ashford? The voice was smooth, formal, unnervingly calm. Nathan Pierce. I closed my eyes. It's just Charlotte now. Of course, he said, though his tone suggested he didn't care either way. We need to discuss your situation. I felt my jaw tighten. What situation? You're pregnant, he said simply, with twins. The Ashford family has interests tied to those children. My hand gripped the phone so hard it hurt. How did you? I stopped myself, took a breath. That's private medical information. How we obtained it doesn't matter, Nathan said, his voice still calm, still professional. What matters is that we're prepared to work with you to ensure the best outcome for everyone involved. You have no right. Mrs. Charlotte, he corrected himself. I understand this is difficult, but let me be clear. We're prepared to offer you an additional $5 million in exchange for shared custody. The children will be raised with access to both parents and will carry the Ashford name. I stared at the sandwich on the counter, at the kitchen I'd built in this new life, at the window overlooking Portland. They're my children, I said. Biologically, they're also Stanley Ashford's children, Nathan said. He gave up those rights when he cheated on me and paid me to disappear. I shot back. Family law doesn't work that way, Charlotte, Nathan said, and for the first time I heard something in his voice. Not sympathy, just honesty. Children have rights to their fathers. Fathers have rights to their children. The divorce settlement didn't address custody because there were no children at the time. That changes things. I pressed my hand to my stomach. We can settle this amicably, Nathan continued. $5 million, shared custody. The children will have access to the Ashford estate resources, education. You'll retain primary physical custody. They'll spend holidays with their father. It's reasonable. Reasonable, I repeated. You want me to hand over my children to the family that called me a mistake and paid me to leave. I want you to consider what's best for the children, Nathan said. I felt rage boiling up in my chest, hot and sharp and suffocating. What's best for them, I said slowly, is to be as far away from that family as possible. Nathan was silent for a moment then. Charlotte, I strongly advise you to reconsider. The Ashford family has resources, legal resources, financial resources. If this goes to court, then we'll go to court, I said. You'll lose. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I'll win. Maybe a judge will see exactly what I see, a family that wants to control 2 innocent children because they carry a name. Not because they're loved, because they're assets. That's not fair, Nathan said, and for the first time his voice cracked. Just a little. Stanley wants to know his children. Then he should have thought about that before he destroyed our marriage, I said. Another silence. Charlotte, Nathan said carefully. We can do this the easy way, or we can go to court. And I assure you the Ashford family has resources beyond your imagination. They will fight. They will win. And you will lose more than just custody. Is that a threat? I asked. It's a reality. I took a breath. Let it out slowly. Tell Mrs. Ashford this, I said, my voice shaking but firm. Those babies are mine. Mine. If your family contacts me again, I'll file for a restraining order. And if you want a legal battle, bring it. You'll lose. I hung up. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. I set the phone down on the counter and stared at it, half expecting it to ring again immediately. It didn't. I stood there for a long time, breathing, trying to calm the adrenaline flooding my system. Then I picked up the phone and called Andrea. She answered on the first ring. Charlotte? They're coming for my children, I said. Tell me everything. I've reviewed every word, every threat, every horrible, calculated sentence Nathan Pierce had uttered. Andrea was silent for a moment after I finished. Don't panic, she eventually said. We have options. The divorce was finalized without any mention of pregnancy. By default, you have sole custody. Stanley would be the one to petition the court for paternity testing and custody rights. That takes time, and we can fight it. But they have money, I countered. Resources. So do you, Andrea replied. $8 million. And more importantly, you have the law on your side. You're the mother. You carried those babies. You're raising them. No judge will award custody to a man who cheated on you, paid you to leave, and then hired a private investigator to stalk you. A sliver of hope flickered within me. But Charlotte, Andrea stated, her voice now grave, they won't give up easily. You need to brace yourself for a fight. A long one. An ugly one. I know, I acquiesced. Good. Come to my office tomorrow. We'll start building your defense. Okay. And Charlotte? Yes? Don't answer any more calls from unknown numbers. If they want to talk to you, they go through me. Understood? Understood. I hung up. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my hand resting on my stomach, feeling the two tiny lives stirring within. They were mine. Only mine. And I would defend them. I kept checking my phone, anticipating another call, another threat. But the phone remained silent until 6 a.m. the following morning. When it finally buzzed, I snatched it up immediately, my heart pounding. Not an unknown number this time. Rebecca? I answered. Hello? Call me now, she commanded, her voice strained and urgent. Then she hung up. My blood ran cold. Before I reveal what Rebecca discovered that morning, I need to know you're still with me. Comment number 1 if you think Brittany planned this betrayal from the start, or comment 2 if you believe she panicked when things fell apart. Your vote matters. I want to see what you think before the truth comes out. Please note the following story includes some fictionalized elements and may not reflect entirely real events. If you'd prefer not to continue, feel free to pause here and explore other content. Brittany's baby isn't Stanley's. Rebecca's words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. I sank onto the couch. What? DNA test, Rebecca stated, her voice still tight with urgency. 0% match. Charlotte, Stanley's not the father. She lied about everything. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. My mind struggled to process the words, but they made no sense. Charlotte? Rebecca's voice pulled me back. Are you there? Yeah, I murmured faintly. I'm here. Tell me everything. She did. Walter called me an hour ago, Rebecca disclosed. He thought you should know before the family does anything else. I pressed my hand to my forehead. What happened? Walter noticed Brittany had been acting strange, Rebecca explained, constantly on her phone, sneaking calls, disappearing for hours at a time. He didn't think much of it at first. She was pregnant, emotional, whatever. Okay, I said. But then he saw something. Rebecca continued. A text notification on her phone. She left it on the counter in the kitchen. The screen lit up with a message from Jay. How much longer do I have to wait? I frowned. Jay. That's what Walter thought, Rebecca confirmed. He didn't know who Jay was, but he felt wrong about it. He thought about you, about what happened, and he decided to take a screenshot. He sent it to Dorothy. He said, already knowing where this was going. Yes, Rebecca affirmed. I leaned back against the couch. What did Dorothy do? She ordered a DNA test, Rebecca reported. Prenatal. You can do them from 9 weeks. Dorothy wasn't taking any chances. She wanted proof. And, Rebecca's voice lowered, probability of paternity 0%. I closed my eyes. Stanley isn't the father, Rebecca reiterated. Brittany lied about everything. I tried to picture it. Dorothy standing in that pristine study, the DNA results in her hand, her face, a mask of cold stone, her voice, sharp as a blade. Who is Jay, Brittany? Rebecca continued, and I could envision it all unfolding. Walter said Brittany tried to deny it at first, Rebecca recounted. Said the message was from a friend, that it was nothing, but then Charles threw the DNA results on the table. I imagined Brittany's face draining of color, her hands trembling. Walter said she broke down, Rebecca continued, started screaming, said Stanley was an easy target, that she and Jeremy Collins, her longtime boyfriend, needed money, that they'd planned the whole thing. My stomach churned. She actually said that? I asked. Word for word, Rebecca confirmed. And then Walter quoted this part. Exactly, she said. You were all so desperate for an heir, you didn't even question it. Something twisted in my chest. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a hollow ache. What did Stanley say? I inquired. Rebecca hesitated. Walter said he just sat there staring at her. And finally he asked, everything was a lie? I could picture his expression, the bewilderment, the hurt. And Brittany? I asked. She laughed, Rebecca stated. Walter said she actually laughed. And then she said, not everything. I really did love your money. I pressed my hand to my mouth. Dorothy told security to escort her out, Rebecca continued, told her she'd get nothing, that if she tried to blackmail the family, they'd bury her. Brittany left screaming, threatening lawsuits, threatening to go to the press, but Dorothy just stood there watching her go. I sat in silence for a long moment. Charlotte? Rebecca's voice was soft. Are you okay? I don't know, I replied honestly, because I truly didn't. Part of me wanted to laugh at the sheer absurdity of it all, the poetic justice. The woman who'd stolen my husband had been a fraud from the start. The baby that had shattered my marriage didn't even exist. Part of me ached for Stanley, for having been used, manipulated, and lied to. But mostly, I felt an overwhelming emptiness. He chose her over me, I said quietly, and she was a lie from the beginning. I know, Rebecca said softly. I gazed out the window at the rain streaking down the glass, the drab Portland sky mirroring my mood. The baby they destroyed my marriage over didn't even exist, I murmured. And now my children, the real heirs they'd always desired, are the ones they're trying to take. Rebecca offered no reply, for there was nothing to say. We spoke for a few more minutes. Rebecca filled in the remaining details, mentioning Walter's concern about Dorothy's potential drastic actions, the family's profound humiliation, and Stanley's complete withdrawal, locked in his room. After we finally ended the call, I remained on the couch for a considerable time, lost in thought, staring blankly. I recalled that night I'd overheard Brittany's voice on the phone, the moment my world imploded, the frantic packing of 7 years of my life into 3 days before disappearing. All of it precipitated by a lie. And now Stanley knew. Dorothy knew. Charles knew. They knew the damage they'd inflicted, the destruction they'd wrought. And for what? For nothing. I placed my hand on my stomach, feeling the gentle swell, the 2 tiny lives growing within me, the true heirs, the ones they had pursued for 7 years, pressuring me to provide them. And now that I finally carried them, they sought to seize them. I picked up the phone and dialed Andrea. "Charlotte?" She answered immediately. "Are you okay?" "Brittany's baby isn't Stanley's," I stated. Silence followed. Then what? I recounted everything. The DNA test, the confrontation, Jeremy Collins, the elaborate deception. When I finished, Andrea paused for a moment. "This changes things," she declared finally. "How?" "It proves their desperation," Andrea explained. "It demonstrates they've been manipulated before, and it highlights Stanley's poor judgment regarding women claiming to carry his children." A flicker of hope ignited within me. "Can we use it?" "Absolutely," Andrea confirmed. "If they pursue custody, we can argue that Stanley's judgment is compromised, that the family is dysfunctional, and that their motives are control, not affection." "Good," I affirmed. "Charlotte," Andrea said carefully, "this is a victory for us, but don't underestimate them. They're humiliated, and humiliated people resort to dangerous actions." "I know," I replied, though a part of me didn't truly believe it. I thought that was the end of it. Brittany exposed, Stanley disgraced, my point proven. I assumed they would leave me alone, too ashamed and embarrassed to continue their fight. I was wrong. 3 days later, on a rainy Tuesday evening, I discovered just how mistaken I was. The car emerged from nowhere. I saw the headlights. That's all I recall before the impact. One moment I was driving home from the grocery store, the windshield wipers struggling against the downpour. The next, the shriek of metal, the explosion of glass, my body violently thrown against the seatbelt. Then, darkness. It was a Tuesday evening in early August, 7 months pregnant, 28 weeks along. The twins, according to the pregnancy app on my phone, were the size of eggplants. Their lungs were developing. Their eyes could open and close. They could hear my voice. I'd been contemplating names on my drive home, perhaps Noah and Ethan, or something else entirely. Something that echoed hope rather than history. The rain fell in sheets, the kind that transformed Portland streets into miniature rivers. My windshield wipers were on their highest setting, offering barely 5 feet of visibility. Streetlights bled onto the wet asphalt, resembling smeared paint. Groceries filled the trunk. Apples, yogurt, crackers, the few things I could stomach these days. I was humming a tune I couldn't identify, something soft and aimless. I turned onto Elm Street, heading towards my apartment. I didn't see the black SUV until it was too late. It emerged from a side street on my right. No headlights, no brake lights, no warning. Just a dark shape hurtling towards me through the rain. I saw it in the final second. No time to brake, no time to swerve, no time to do anything but brace myself. The collision struck the passenger side of my car like a detonation. The sound was deafening. Metal screamed, glass shattered inward. My body was flung sideways against the seatbelt, the force so violent I felt a crack in my ribs, a sharp, white-hot pain. The airbag deployed, striking my nose and mouth. My car spun. Once, twice. I couldn't tell. Then it slammed into something solid, a lamppost. The world stopped spinning. Everything went still. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then, one thought emerged. The babies. I pressed my hand to my stomach, gasping for air. Please, I whispered. Please be okay. I couldn't feel them moving. Please. The darkness beckoned, and then it consumed me entirely. I awoke to the wail of sirens, the sensation of rain on my face, and disembodied voices shouting. Someone was yanking at my door, hands on my shoulders, a flashlight beam blinding me. Ma'am, can you hear me? The babies, I managed to articulate. I'm pregnant, twins, 28 weeks. The paramedic's expression shifted, calm replaced by urgency. We need to get her out now, he yelled. Pregnant, 28 weeks, twins, move. They worked swiftly. A neck brace, a stretcher, rain soaking through my clothes. My hand remained on my stomach the entire time. Please, please, please. The ambulance ride was a blur. Sirens, flashing lights, someone monitoring my pulse, another speaking into a radio. Riverside Medical Center, ETA 4 minutes, 28-year-old female pregnant with twins, motor vehicle collision, possible rib fractures. I closed my eyes. Please. Dr. Palmer was waiting as they wheeled me into the emergency room. Seeing her face brought a near-tearful wave of relief. Charlotte, she said, her voice calm yet urgent. We're going to check on the babies immediately. Can you tell me where it hurts? Everywhere, I whispered. My ribs, my side. But the babies, please. We'll check them first, she assured me. They transferred me to a bed, lifted my shirt, and spread cold gel onto my stomach. Dr. Palmer pressed the ultrasound probe against my skin. I held my breath. The screen flickered, showing gray shapes, shadows, and then 2 tiny heartbeats, pulsing like twin stars. Thump, 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 thump. Steady, strong, alive. I sobbed. They're okay, Dr. Palmer said softly. Both heartbeats are strong. No signs of placental abruption, no internal bleeding. They're fighters, Charlotte, just like their mother. I couldn't stop crying. Are you sure? I'm sure, she affirmed, squeezing my hand. We'll keep you overnight for observation, but right now, they're safe. Safe. I closed my eyes, letting the relief wash over me. An hour later, I was moved to a private room. My ribs were bruised, not broken. My shoulder was sprained. I had cuts on my face from the airbag and shattered glass. But the babies were safe. That was all that mattered. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when a knock sounded at the door. A man in a suit entered, mid-40s, with graying hair and a serious expression. Miss Charlotte, he said. I'm Detective Morrison, Portland PD. Do you have a moment? I nodded. He pulled a chair beside the bed. We've been investigating the collision, he stated. Do you remember anything about the vehicle that hit you? I closed my eyes. It was a black SUV, large. It came out of nowhere. No headlights. Detective Morrison nodded, making notes. We reviewed traffic camera footage from the area. That car followed you for 3 blocks before the collision. My blood ran cold. What? It followed you, he repeated. Stayed 2 cars behind, no headlights. And when you turned onto Elm Street, it accelerated and ran the stop sign, deliberately. I stared at him. You're saying this wasn't an accident? Detective Morrison's voice was calm but firm. Someone deliberately caused this collision. This was attempted vehicular assault. I couldn't breathe. Who? I whispered. That's what we're trying to determine, he replied. The license plate was fake. The vehicle was found abandoned 3 miles away. It was a rental. Fake ID. Paid in cash. I pressed my hand to my stomach. Someone had tried to harm me, to harm them, to kill us. Detective Morrison produced a tablet from his bag. We do have one lead, he said. Footage from the rental agency's security camera. The person who rented the car 2 days ago. He tapped the screen, turning it towards me. The image was grainy but clear enough. A woman, blonde hair pulled back, sunglasses, a black jacket. I stopped breathing. I knew that face. "Do you know this person?" Detective Morrison inquired. I nodded slowly, my voice barely a whisper. "Her name is Brittany." That name echoed in my head all night. Brittany. Lying in the hospital bed, the twins moving within me. Alive, thank God. I tried to comprehend why. Why would she do this? What did she stand to gain? By morning, I had my answer, and it was more devastating than I had imagined. Detective Morrison returned at 8 a.m. I hadn't slept. With every closed eye, I saw headlights, heard screeching metal, felt the impact. But the twins kept moving, shifting, kicking, a constant reminder that they were still there, still safe. Morrison knocked softly before entering. He looked as exhausted as I felt, as if he too had been awake all night. "Miss Charlotte," he said, "do you have a few minutes?" I nodded. "Did you find her?" "We did," he replied. Brittany Collins was arrested at 6 a.m. this morning at a motel near the airport. She and Jeremy Collins were packing. They had 2 one-way tickets to Mexico City. The flight was scheduled to depart at noon. A chill settled in my chest. She was fleeing? Yes, Morrison confirmed. He pulled out his tablet and sat in the chair beside my bed. "We've been reviewing her digital footprint, social media, text messages, and we found quite a bit." Detective Morrison turned the screen towards me, displaying a screenshot from Brittany's social media account, posted 2 days before the accident. "Some people think they can just leave and win. Watch what happens next." I stared at the post, the chilling realization dawning that she had been planning this all along. "Yes," Morrison confirmed, his voice grave. He swiped to the next image, revealing a text message thread between Brittany and someone identified as Jay in her phone. Brittany had written, "They humiliated me, threw me out like trash. I'll make all of them pay." Jay's reply was, "Baby, it's not worth it. Let's just go." But Brittany was resolute. "No. She thinks she won. She thinks she gets to walk away with everything. I'm not letting that happen." Morrison swiped again, revealing another message from Brittany. "If I can't get the Ashford money, neither will she." A wave of nausea washed over me. "She tried to hurt me," I whispered. "Just because she got caught lying?" "Revenge," Morrison stated simply. "She blamed you for her exposure, for losing the Ashford family's money and protection. In her mind, you were the reason her plan fell apart." I pressed my hand to my stomach, the sheer terror of what could have happened to my babies gripping me. "I know," Morrison said, his voice gentler now. "But she didn't. And now she's facing multiple felony charges. Attempted vehicular homicide, assault with a deadly weapon, fleeing the scene of an accident. If convicted, she's looking at 15 to 20 years. I closed my eyes, a flicker of relief acknowledging the severity of her crimes. "Good." Morrison stood. "I'll keep you updated on the case. If you need anything, call me." He handed me his card and left. I remained there for a long time, staring blankly at the wall, the cold reality of Brittany's calculated revenge sinking in. An hour later, Andrea Stone arrived. "Charlotte," she said, rushing to my bedside. "I came as soon as I heard." "I'm okay," I reassured her. "The babies are okay." "Thank God," Andrea breathed. She set her briefcase down and pulled a chair close. "I've been in contact with Detective Morrison. This changes everything." "How?" I asked, a sliver of hope emerging. "The Ashfords can't use this against you," Andrea explained. "They can't claim you're unfit or unsafe. Brittany acted alone. This has nothing to do with your ability to parent. If anything, it proves you're a target, that you need protection, not scrutiny." The thought hadn't occurred to me. "So, they can't use the accident to take the babies?" I inquired. "No," Andrea stated firmly. "In fact, If they try, we can argue that their association with Brittany, the woman Stanley was involved with, puts the children at risk. Not you. A genuine flicker of hope ignited within me. Really? Really? Andrea confirmed. This is a win for us, Charlotte. A terrible, awful win. But a win. My phone buzzed on the bedside table. I glanced at it. A text from Rebecca. Rebecca Stanley's calling. Do you want me to answer? I stared at the screen. Stanley. Of course he knew. Of course, he'd heard about the accident. What is it? Andrea asked. Stanley, I said. He's calling. Do you want to talk to him? I considered it, reflecting on everything he'd done, everything he'd chosen. No, I said. I don't want to talk to him. My phone rang again. Rebecca's name flashed on the screen. I answered. Hey. Charlotte, Rebecca said. Stanley's here. I sat up. Where? Downstairs in the hospital lobby. He flew in this morning. He's asking to see you. My stomach plummeted. Tell him no, I said. Charlotte. Tell him I need time, I insisted, my voice firm. Tell him I'm not ready. Rebecca hesitated. Okay, I'll tell him. I hung up. Andrea was watching me. That was smart, she said. I don't want to see him, I stated. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You don't have to, Andrea reassured me. This is your recovery, your choice. But Stanley didn't leave. I learned later from Rebecca, who heard it from Walter, that he'd checked into a hotel 3 blocks from the hospital to wait. To be nearby in case I changed my mind. I didn't. I spent 2 more days in the hospital. The twins were monitored constantly, every heartbeat, every movement. Dr. Palmer visited twice a day to check on us. They're doing beautifully, she announced on the 3rd morning. Strong, resilient, just like you. When can I go home? I asked. Today, she said with a smile. As long as you promise to rest. No stress, no heavy lifting, and follow-up appointments every week until delivery. I promise. Rebecca came to pick me up that afternoon. She helped me into the passenger seat, buckling me in as if I were fragile. Perhaps I was. We drove through Portland in silence. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds. I stared out the window, my hand resting on my stomach. The twins were still moving, still alive, still mine. I was home for less than an hour when my phone rang, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something prompted me to pick up. Hello? Charlotte? A woman's voice said. Hesitant. Familiar. My heart stopped. Mom? Yes, she replied, her voice cracking. Charlotte, I heard about the accident. Are you okay? Are the babies okay? I couldn't speak. I hadn't heard my mother's voice in 7 years, not since the day I married Stanley, the day she told me I was making a mistake, the day I told her I never wanted to see her again. Charlotte, she said again, please talk to me. I closed my eyes. I'm okay, I said quietly. The babies are okay. Thank God, she whispered. Charlotte, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to call, but I had to. I had to know you were safe. I didn't know what to say. Can we talk? She asked. Please. I looked out the window at the Portland skyline, at the life I had built without her. I don't know, I said honestly. I understand, she said. But Charlotte, I'm here. If you need me, I'm here. She gave me her number, made me promise to think about it, and then she hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. Brittany was in jail. Stanley was 3 blocks away, waiting. And my mother, who I hadn't spoken to in 7 years, was asking for a second chance. The twins kicked. I pressed my hand to my stomach and closed my eyes. Everything was changing, and I didn't know if I was ready. Charlotte, sweetheart, it's Mom. 7 years. It had been 7 years since I'd last heard that voice. 7 years since I'd left the Ashford family, my real family, the one I was born into, because they made me choose Stanley or them. I chose wrong. And now, lying in a hospital bed after someone tried to harm me and my children, I heard my mother's voice crack with tears. Please don't hang up. I didn't, but I couldn't speak either. Charlotte, she said again, are you there? I'm here, I whispered. I heard her exhale, a shaky, relieved sound. Thank God, Charlotte. I never stopped looking for you, sweetheart. When I saw the news, the accident, I had to call. It took me almost dying for you to reach out, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She didn't answer right away. And when she did, her voice was broken. No, she said. I've wanted to call every day for 7 years, but you said if I didn't accept Stanley, you'd never contact me again. And I didn't want to push you further away. I closed my eyes, remembering that conversation, the ultimatum I'd given, the anger, the hurt. You were right about him, I said quietly. I know, she whispered. But that doesn't mean I was right about how I handled it. There was another voice in the background, deeper, familiar. Is that her? My father. Let me talk to her. Richard. Please. A rustling sound, then my father's voice. Charlotte. His voice was steady, but I could hear the raw emotion underneath. We were wrong. Your mother and I. We were so wrong. I didn't know what to say. We were right about him, he continued. But we were wrong about how we handled it. We should have supported you, not pushed you away. We should have been there, and we weren't. And I'm sorry. Tears slid down my face. Dad, I whispered. We love you, Charlotte, he said. We never stopped loving you. My mother's voice returned. Charlotte, there's something else. Something I need to tell you. I braced myself. I'm sick, she said. Stage 3 breast cancer. I've been on chemo for 4 months. The doctors say I still have time, but not forever. My breath caught. Mom. I don't want to close my eyes without fixing this mistake, she said, her voice breaking. Without meeting my grandchildren. I pressed my hand to my stomach, feeling the twins shift beneath my palm. I'm having twins, I said, my voice barely audible. 2 boys. I heard her sob, a full, unguarded sound. Oh, Charlotte, she whispered. Can we see you? Please. I looked out the window at the Portland skyline, gray and heavy with rain. Yes, I said. Yes, you can. They arrived that afternoon. Rebecca helped me sit up in bed, fixed my hair, brought me water. She squeezed my hand before she left. You okay? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. You will be, she said. When the knock came, I almost didn't answer. But then the door opened, and there they were. My mother, my father. Catherine looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. She wore a soft gray headscarf over her head, and her face was pale. But her eyes were the same, warm and brown and full of love. Richard stood beside her, his hand on her back. His hair was grayer, his shoulders a little more stooped, but his expression was the same steady calm I'd grown up with. Charlotte, my mother whispered. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I started crying. She crossed the room in 3 steps and wrapped her arms around me, carefully, gently, as if I might break. I'm so sorry, she whispered into my hair. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry too, I sobbed. My father joined us, his arms around both of us. The 3 of us stood there, holding each other, crying like the world was ending and beginning all at once. We're here now, he said quietly. We're not going anywhere. We spent that entire afternoon talking, Really talking. For the first time in 7 years. I told user the narrative cuts off here, leaving the reader to imagine what Charlotte will tell her parents. I understand, Charlotte, Dorothy said, her voice softer now, devoid of its usual steel. Actions, respect. I can do that. I will do better. We sat in silence for a few more moments, the unspoken weight of years hanging between us. The coffee shop was no longer a neutral territory. It was a battlefield where a truce had been declared, not a peace treaty signed. I didn't know if peace was even possible, but for the first time, I felt a sliver of hope that it might be. Thank you for meeting me, Dorothy said finally, rising. Her movements were still careful, but there was a less rigid quality to them. Don't thank me yet, I replied, my voice still measured. This is just a conversation. Until you prove yourself, the door remains closed. She nodded, accepting my terms without argument. As she walked away, I watched her go, a complex mix of emotions swirling within me. Relief, exhaustion, a flicker of resentment, and yes, a very small, hesitant seed of hope. I stayed at the coffee shop for another hour, nursing my now cold herbal tea. I replayed the conversation in my head, dissecting Dorothy's words, her demeanor. She had apologized, admitted her faults, and acknowledged her role in creating the toxic environment that had led to Brittany's actions. It was more than I had ever expected. As I walked back to my apartment, the afternoon sun felt warmer than it had in weeks. My babies stirred within me, a gentle reminder of the future I was fighting for. I wasn't the same Charlotte who had been terrorized by Dorothy Ashford. I had survived. I had grown stronger. And I would protect my children with everything I had. The next few weeks were a blur of doctor's appointments, nesting, and quiet preparations for the twins' arrival. My parents visited frequently, their presence a comforting balm. They brought me meals, helped me organize the nursery, and simply sat with me, a reminder that I was no longer navigating this journey alone. Dorothy kept her word. She didn't call, didn't show up unannounced. She sent occasional texts, simple messages asking how I was, how the babies were doing. I responded sparingly, cautiously, but I responded. She respected my boundaries, my need for space. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. One evening, about a week before my due date, I was sitting on my couch, feeling the familiar pressure of my swollen belly, when my phone rang. It was Dorothy. Charlotte, she began, her voice calm and steady. I was wondering if you might be amenable to a visit. I've brought some things for the babies. I paused, considering. The babies were coming soon, and perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to test the waters. At my apartment? I asked. If that's convenient, yes, she replied. All right, I said. In an hour. When Dorothy arrived, she was carrying 2 small, elaborately wrapped gifts. She stood in the doorway, hands held slightly away from her body, waiting for an invitation. I opened the door wider and stepped aside. Come in, I said. She entered the living room, her eyes taking in the nursery items visible through the open door. She didn't try to dominate the space, didn't offer unsolicited advice. She sat on the edge of the sofa, exactly where I indicated, and placed the gifts on the coffee table. Thank you for letting me come, she said, her gaze meeting mine. There was no hint of the old arrogance, just a quiet sincerity. They're due any day now, I said, wanting to steer the conversation. I know, Dorothy replied. I've been thinking about names. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Yes, she said. Just thinking. Wondering if you've settled on any. I told her the names we'd chosen. She listened intently, nodding. They're beautiful names, she said. Strong, meaningful. We talked for about an hour. It wasn't a deep, emotional conversation, But it was a conversation. We spoke about the weather, about my apartment, about her garden. Small talk, but it felt significant. It felt like a foundation. When it was time for her to leave, she stood by the door. "Charlotte," she said, her voice regaining a touch of its old timbre, but without the edge. "I will never ask for anything. I will simply be here, if you will let me, and if you don't, I will understand." I looked at her, really looked at her. The tired lines around her eyes were still there, but they seemed less like exhaustion and more like the etchings of a life lived, a life that had seen much. "Show me, Dorothy," I said. "Just show me with your actions. That's all I ask." She nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "I will." As she left, I felt a sense of quiet peace settle over me. The future was still uncertain, but I was no longer facing it alone. I had my babies, my chosen family, and perhaps, just perhaps, a chance to build something new with the woman who had once been my greatest fear. The world kept turning, and I was turning with it, ready for whatever came next. The second wave of pushing was even more intense, fueled by a primal instinct I never knew I possessed. My mother and Rebecca's voices were a distant hum, their hands a grounding presence I desperately clung to. With a final guttural roar, another cry ripped through the room. "It's a boy!" Dr. Palmer's voice was triumphant. "Both boys are healthy, Charlotte. 2 beautiful, perfect boys." This time, when the tiny, squirming body was placed on my chest, the world narrowed to just him and me. He was slightly smaller than his brother, his cries a little softer, but no less immediate. I held them both, their warm weight settling against me, their tiny hands fisted near their faces. My heart felt it might burst from my chest. They were here. They were real. The room buzzed with activity as nurses cleaned the babies, weighed them, and checked them over. My mother and Rebecca, their faces etched with relief and joy, beamed at me. Dr. Palmer, her smile genuine, carefully stitched me up. "You did wonderfully, Charlotte," she said, her voice warm. "Absolutely wonderfully. You have 2 beautiful, healthy sons." Later, much later, after they'd been cleaned, dressed in tiny hospital gowns and settled in my arms, my parents arrived. My mother looked at the 2 sleeping infants with a reverence I'd never seen before. My father, usually so stoic, had tears in his eyes. "They're perfect, sweetheart," he whispered, reaching out a hesitant finger to gently stroke the back of one of the babies' heads. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and a profound, overwhelming love. Rebecca and Andrea were constant presences, helping with the babies, bringing me food, and simply keeping me company. My mother was a rock, her calm presence a steady anchor in the whirlwind of new motherhood. One afternoon, about a week after the birth, as I sat in a rocking chair, nursing one of the twins, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dorothy. "Thinking of you and the babies. Hope all is well. D." I looked at the message for a long moment. I hadn't seen Dorothy since our meeting at the coffee shop. She had kept her word, maintaining a respectful distance. But now, with these 2 precious lives in my arms, I felt a shift. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet strength and a pragmatic desire for connection, for the children to know their family, whatever their complicated history. I sent a quick reply. "They are doing well. Thank you for asking." A few days later, another text. "If you are amenable, I would like to visit. Perhaps a short visit this time. I can be there at 2 p.m. on Thursday." I hesitated. My protective instinct screamed. But then I looked at the sleeping faces of my sons. They deserved a family, a full one, if possible. And I had promised Dorothy a chance to prove herself not with words, but with actions. "Thursday at 2, I texted back. On Thursday, the apartment felt different. I had tidied up, put out tiny onesies and burp cloths in view. My mother was there, a silent, supportive presence. When the doorbell rang, my heart gave a familiar flutter, but it wasn't fear. It was something more akin to anticipation. I opened the door. Dorothy stood there, not with the imposing confidence of her past, but with a quiet humility. She held a small, beautifully wrapped gift. "Hello, Charlotte," she said, her voice soft. "May I?" She gestured towards the living room. "Come in," I replied, stepping aside. Dorothy entered, her eyes immediately drawn to the bassinet in the corner. She didn't rush towards it, didn't crowd. She simply stood, her gaze taking in the two sleeping bundles. "They are beautiful," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. We sat for a while, talking about mundane things, about the city, about my parents' trips to visit. She didn't ask for grand gestures, didn't try to force a relationship. When she finally offered the gift, it was a small, intricately carved wooden mobile, perfect for a nursery. "It's just a small token," she said, "to welcome them." I accepted it, genuinely touched. "Thank you, Dorothy. That's very thoughtful." As she prepared to leave, she looked directly at me, her eyes holding a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Charlotte," she said, "I am truly grateful for this chance, for the chance to be part of their lives, in whatever way you deem appropriate. I understand the boundaries. I will respect them." I met her gaze, a small smile finally gracing my lips. "I'm holding you to that, Dorothy," I said. "Actions, not words." She nodded, a genuine smile finally breaking through her carefully constructed composure. "Actions," she agreed. As Dorothy walked away, I watched her go, a sense of closure settling over me. The past was still there, a part of my story, but it no longer held the power it once did. I had my sons, I had my support system, and I was building a future, brick by brick, with intention and a quiet optimism. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. I took a deep breath. Ethan's been a bit fussy today. Noah's usually more settled. I carefully handed Noah to Stanley, my hands brushing against his. He felt solid, warm, real, a stark contrast to the phantom pain and resentment I'd carried for so long. Stanley cradled Noah, his movements tentative at first, then more confident. He murmured soft words to the baby, his voice a low rumble that seemed to soothe, to connect. Noah, true to my prediction, settled against his father's chest, his tiny fingers still loosely encircling Stanley's thumb. Andrea shifted on the couch, her presence a constant, quiet reminder of the boundaries, of the legal framework that governed this fragile interaction. She was my anchor, my shield, ensuring that history didn't repeat itself at my son's expense. I watched them, a strange mix of emotions swirling within me. There was a pang of something long buried, a ghost of what might have been. There was a fierce protectiveness that made my teeth clench, but beneath it all, a nascent flicker of peace. I was doing what I thought was best for my children, for their future, even if it meant navigating this uncomfortable territory. Stanley looked up at me, a raw vulnerability in his eyes. "Thank you, Charlotte," he said, his voice raspy, "for this." I simply nodded, unable to articulate the complex tapestry of feelings that had led me to this moment. He spent the rest of the hour talking softly to Noah, his face a mask of concentration and a dawning fragile hope. Ethan, meanwhile, explored his playmat with newfound vigor, his little grunts and squeaks filling the room. When the hour was up, Stanley carefully handed Noah back to me. The baby stirred, nuzzling into my chest, his familiar scent a comfort. Stanley's departure was as quiet as his arrival, a brief nod to Andrea, A fleeting glance at Ethan, and then he was gone, leaving behind a silence that felt both heavy and empty. As I held Noah, rocking him gently, I knew this was just the beginning. A long, hard road lay ahead, filled with more difficult conversations, more carefully negotiated compromises, and more moments of doubt. But for the first time, the idea of forging a path forward, of building a bridge, however precarious, felt possible. My mother's remission had brought a lightness into our lives that radiated outwards. Her recovery was a testament to her strength, and her presence was a constant, comforting reminder of resilience. She had been there through every step of Noah's and Ethan's lives, her love a steady, unwavering force. My father, too, had found a quiet joy in being a grandfather. The wooden rocking horse, once a symbol of potential, was now a well-loved fixture, its smooth wood worn by tiny hands and curious explorations. He would sit with the boys sometimes, telling them stories in his deep, rumbling voice, stories about courage and adventure, stories I hoped they would carry with them. Rebecca, Auntie Becca, was an indispensable part of our lives. She was the one who could coax a giggle out of a grumpy baby, the one who knew exactly when I needed a strong cup of coffee and a listening ear. She was family, as much as my own parents, her loyalty and love a constant, reassuring presence. Life was far from perfect. There were still sleepless nights, the occasional tantrum from a toddler who had decided he was too old for naps, and the ever-present awareness of the delicate balance I had to maintain. But it was mine. It was rich and full, brimming with a love so potent it often took my breath away. A year later, standing in the park, watching Ethan chase after a bright red ball and Noah tentatively exploring the base of a towering oak tree, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Stanley's visits had become more regular, the conversations with Andrea less fraught, the atmosphere slowly shifting from guarded suspicion to a tentative, grudging respect. He was still their father, and they were becoming his children too, slowly, awkwardly, but surely. Dorothy had sent periodic updates, small gifts for birthdays and holidays, always respectful of the boundaries. The word family still felt complex, an intricate web woven with threads of pain and healing, of loss and creation. But as I watched my sons, their laughter ringing through the crisp autumn air, I knew I was building something good, something real, something that, in its own unique way, was whole. Not unless he proved he was worthy of them, I stated quietly. You can hold Noah, I conceded, but if he cries, you hand him back immediately. Of course, Stanley agreed, nodding swiftly. He carefully lifted Noah, cradling him against his chest with an evident awkwardness that betrayed his inexperience with infants. Noah squirmed briefly before settling, his tiny fist clenching into Stanley's shirt. Stanley's eyes welled up. He's perfect, he whispered. They both are, I affirmed firmly. And they're mine. Stanley, not yours, not your family's. They are mine. Stanley looked up, his expression pained. I know. I'm not seeking custody. I'm not asking for anything beyond the opportunity to be a father, if you'll permit me. I studied him intently for a long moment, searching his face for any trace of the man who had betrayed me, who had chosen Brittany, who had allowed his mother to label me a mistake. I saw remnants of him there, but also something else, something that resembled regret. Forgiveness isn't a right you can demand, Stanley, I said softly, my voice steady and clear. It's something you must earn. If you wish to be a part of their lives, you'll need to demonstrate through actions, not mere words, that you've changed. This may take months. It may take years. I'm not promising anything other than this. I won't obstruct you. But I won't make it easy either. Stanley nodded slowly, his throat working as he swallowed. That's fair. More than fair. And one more thing, I continued, leaning forward. The moment you cause them emotional harm in any way, you are cut off. Permanently. Do you understand? I understand, Stanley replied, his voice hoarse. He glanced down at Noah, then back at me. I won't let them down, I swear. I offered no response. Promises were easily given. Actions were what truly mattered. After an hour, Stanley departed. He returned Noah to me, gently brushed a finger across Ethan's cheek, and left without another word. Andrea lingered a few minutes longer, taking notes, inquiring about my well-being. I assured her I was fine, and I was. That afternoon, I took the boys to the park near my apartment. The sun had emerged, pale and watery, but warm enough. I spread a blanket on the grass and laid them side by side, their eyes wide as they gazed up at the sky. I sat beside them cross-legged, watching them discover the world. Noah reached for a blade of grass. Ethan kicked his legs, emitting happy gurgling sounds. I picked up Noah's tiny hand and kissed it gently. They had offered me $8 million to vanish, to erase myself from their lives as if 7 years of marriage could be bought and sold like a mere transaction. I had accepted the money, but I hadn't disappeared. Instead, I had forged a new existence, one where I wasn't defined by their expectations, their judgment, or their need for control. Forgiveness was a complex matter. It wasn't a binary choice, all or nothing. It was messy, slow, and at times, agonizing. I had forgiven my parents for pushing me away. I was learning to forgive Dorothy for her cruelty. I wasn't certain if I would ever fully forgive Stanley. Perhaps I would. Perhaps I wouldn't. But I had learned this. Clinging to anger only harmed me. Releasing it, even a little, was liberation. The door wasn't shut, but it wasn't wide open either, and that was acceptable. Because for the first time in 7 years, I wasn't living to meet anyone else's expectations. Not the Ashfords, not Stanley's, not even my parents. I was simply me, Charlotte, a mother, a daughter, a friend, and that was sufficient. I looked down at Noah and Ethan, their faces turned towards mine, their eyes bright and trusting. They were unaware of the betrayal, the money, or the accident. They didn't know about Dorothy's cruelty or Brittany's deceit. They only knew that I was present, that I loved them, and that I would protect them with all my being. This is our life now, I whispered to them. Not perfect, not without scars, but ours, completely and undeniably ours, and that is the greatest gift of all. The sun broke through the clouds, bathing the park in golden light. Noah offered his first genuine smile, wide and toothless, utterly perfect. Ethan kicked his legs with more vigor, his own smile following suit. I smiled back, tears welling in my eyes. This was home. Not a location, not a house, but these 2 boys, this moment, this hard-won peace. This was enough. Reflecting on everything that transpired, the familial betrayals, the retaliations, the pain, the losses, and the unforeseen miracles. I now realize my story is not solely about survival. It's about discovering who I am when all that I believed defined me was stripped away. Do not emulate me. Do not wait 7 years to perceive the truth. Do not compromise your voice, your boundaries, your self-worth for the approval of others. I relinquished my parents, my identity, my dreams, all to fit into a family that never truly embraced me. And when they attempted familial retribution by offering me money to disappear, I nearly allowed them to erase me entirely. But God had different plans. When I believed I had lost everything, He gave me Noah and Ethan. When I thought I was alone, He reunited me with my parents. When familial betrayal nearly shattered me, He reminded me that I was never truly abandoned. God does not waste our pain, He transforms it. And sometimes, The most profound blessings are concealed within the most arduous trials. Here's what I've gleaned. Familial betrayal does not define you. Familial revenge does not bring healing, forgiveness. True forgiveness isn't about absolving others, it's about liberating yourself from the burden of bitterness. It's choosing tranquility over retribution. It's trusting that God is witness, God is aware, and God will rectify matters in His own time. My counsel: heed your instincts, establish boundaries. Do not barter your dignity for acceptance. And remember, those who genuinely love you will never ask you to diminish yourself to make them comfortable. God granted me a second chance, not merely at motherhood, but at life itself, and I am thankful not for the pain, but for the lessons it imparted. If this narrative has resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced familial betrayal or grappled with forgiveness? I would cherish hearing your story. Kindly like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more such meaningful narratives. Thank you immeasurably for accompanying me to the very end. I value each and every one of you. Kindly note, the stories presented on this channel may incorporate fictionalized elements created for educational and contemplative purposes. Should this content not align with your preferences, feel free to explore other videos that better suit your needs.